Good morning, everyone.
Good
I am
morning.
Good morning. I am Susan Ortiz, standing in for Courtney Battle today. Thank you, everyone who is joining us this morning for part 3 of the Electrification and Healthy Housing Solutions webinar series that HAND is proud to host in partnership with National Housing Trust. I know it's an interesting day for us to be on here hosting a webinar, and I know a lot of us are probably feeling a lot of mixed emotions, myself included. So I just know that we see you and we appreciate you taking the time out of your day to still join into this session and tune in for this really important content that we have planned for you all today. On the surface, this series in particular may seem like it's focused on green building, but there are a lot of equity implications behind parts 1 and part 2. If you missed, the recordings are available on HAND's YouTube page. And then part 3 that we have planned for you today. The implications of a lot of the processes that are going into decarbonizing buildings are disproportionately affecting communities of color, specifically children, which we have Kathy Zeisel here today, who can give us a little bit more information and context there as well. So super excited to bring her into the conversation. And I just want to give a huge thank you to our speakers who have taken the time out of their day to share with us and join us for this session. But without further ado, because we have a really packed agenda for you all today, I'm going to toss it over to Leslie, who's going to help set the stage for today and get us started with our amazing slate of speakers. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much, Susan. It is an interesting day, and I also echo the appreciation. I'm Leslie Zarker, Director of Sustainability Policy at National Housing Trust. Next slide. Just a bit about National Housing Trust. We're a national nonprofit. We work to create and preserve affordable multifamily housing for underserved families. Our home base is Washington, D.C. We own a portfolio of 4,000 multifamily units across 13 states and D.C. We have a dedicated resident services team that provides on-site services supporting residents. We're also a community development financial institution, or CDFI, and I am part of NHT's policy innovations team. Next slide. Today's webinar is Pests, Mold, and Muck, Cost-Effective Strategies to Remediate Indoor Air Allergens in Multifamily Affordable Housing. And it's part of a 3-part series, as Susan mentioned, co-hosted by our DC Healthy, Green, and Affordable Housing program. On October 17th, we heard from experts on heat pump and electrification solutions in affordable multifamily housing. And on October 31st, we heard Getting Ventilation Right, Understanding and Controlling Airflows in Multifamily Buildings. And these 3 topics really do complement and build upon each other. They're integral to realizing our goals as affordable housing developers to create safe, healthy, and affordable homes. So if you missed the first 2, you can view the recordings. You can go to handhousing.org to the URL at the bottom of the screen there and navigate to the pages you need to watch those videos. I'd like to introduce our speakers. That's right, thanks. Today we'll hear from Kathy Zeisel at Children's Law Center. She'll help us set the stage here in DC. And we'll also be hearing from our speakers, Dr. Changlu Wang from Rutgers University, Dr. Kobe Shaw from North Carolina State University, and William Rusty Spearman from Arrowhead Consulting. They'll present studies on proven strategies to control cockroach and rodent infestations, as well as best practices to identify and remediate sources of plumbing leaks and water intrusions. Next slide. So I'd like to provide just a little context for the genesis of our program, the DC Healthy, Green, Affordable Housing Program, and for the webinar series. Our pilot projects in the HGA housing program is to retrofit 6 properties, primarily in wards 7 and 8 in DC, and to retrofit them for electrification, energy efficiency, upgrades, and to improve the health outcomes for residents. Our goal is that nearly 800 families across these properties will benefit from housing that's free of sources of indoor air allergens, is climate resilient, energy efficient, and affordable. So we're taking an integrated approach over the next couple of years to reach these goals. We're supporting building owners by providing financial and technical assistance. A core principle of the project is to engage residents early to understand their priorities and concerns with green retrofits. And we know a well-trained workforce is critical to reaching clean energy goals, so we aim to create mentorship opportunities for small and minority business contractors in DC. And we're partnering with local groups, such as Children's Law Center, Children's National Hospital, and also Latino Economic Development Center. Next slide. So what's driving this work? A key driver is the unhealthy housing conditions that lead to poor health outcomes for residents of affordable housing. And to address that, we've partnered with Children's National and Children's Law Center to specifically target properties with a high prevalence of children with asthma living in them. And these slides provide some context for that. 10% of DC's children suffer from asthma. That's actually quite high. It's nearly the highest rate by state for pediatric asthma nationwide. Even worse, these cases are concentrated in communities of color. The map on the left shows childhood asthma rates by zip code. The highest rates are in deep blue in wards 7 and 8, historically impacted by redlining in DC. And this is also where the largest communities of color are also located, as indicated by the map on the right. And I just want to mention as well, another stressful problem for DC's low-income households is their outsized energy burdens, especially compared to non-low-income peers. So low-income households in DC spend over 7% of their gross income on utility bills compared to about 2% for non-low-income households. So a lot of challenges that we're tackling in our program. With that, I'd like to introduce our speakers. We're delighted to have Kathy with us. She is the Director of Special Legal Projects at DC Children's Law Center and one of DC's leading experts in tenants' rights to healthy housing. She was previously a senior supervising attorney with Healthy Together, and she now trains and mentors staff and pro bono attorneys on housing condition cases. Welcome, Kathy.
Thanks, Leslie. I just want to share with everybody a little bit about Children's Law Center. You can go to the next slide. So Children's Law Center might sound like an unusual partner here, but we have come to this work over many, many years of housing conditions through our medical legal partnership. If you want to go to the next slide, I can tell you a little bit about what Children's Law Center does. So Children's Law Center is a legal services organization. We reach 1 out of every 9 children in DC's lowest under-resourced neighborhoods. We also have lawyers on site at 6 health clinics around the city, and we've been around since 1996 and served 30,000 children and families in DC. We not only provide individual representation, but we try to use the knowledge we get from working with individual families and children to come up with systemic solutions to solve the problems that we see. And that's how we came to housing conditions work. Can you go to the next slide? We have our medical legal partnerships with Mary Center, Children's National, and Unity. And what we do is we have an attorney that partners with pediatric primary care centers, also with Impact DC, the Children's National program, emergency room program that works to intervene with children with asthma. As Leslie mentioned, DC has an extremely high both prevalence of asthma among children and also a huge disparity among who's impacted with asthma. If you live across the river in DC, you're 27 more times more likely to end up in the hospital with asthma than if you live in Ward 3. And that's a health disparity that is often impacted by the housing conditions you live in that exacerbate the asthma. So we get referrals from these primary health care clinics where the doctor sees a impact on the child's health. That's something that may be non-medical. So the child may be completely compliant with all of their asthma medications with the regime that the doctor set forward and still be having a lot of asthma exacerbations. and they say, hey, we think we need a lawyer to come in here and intervene. So we've done a lot of this work for individual families trying to get the housing conditions remedied. But honestly, we'd love to put ourselves out of a job and not do this individual tenant by individual tenant. And so we started working at this at a policy level, trying to work with agencies, trying to change laws. And in this newer role that I'm in, we've also been working at it in the partnership with National Housing Trust that Leslie is talking about, where we have been trying to find collaborative ways to bring new money into the district to work with property owners who want to make these changes and thinking about how to get this done collaboratively so that we can get healthier, affordable housing for families in the district. Okay. Just so you have a sense of what we see, these are the most common health harming housing problems that we see from our intakes. 41% of families report mold, 40% mice, and you can see up here on the slide. In housing conditions court, about 50% of the cases report mold that are coming to housing conditions court. So we know it's a pretty significant problem in DC, and we are often seeing mold as a shorthand. When I talk about mold, I'm often using it as a shorthand that there's water intrusion in the home. And also we're concerned because that water is often bringing forward years and years of lead paint that might be buried beneath the surface. About 95% of the low-income tenants we work with live in housing built before 1978. So we're concerned about mold as an asthma exacerbation problem because most of the kids we work with, when there's mold, their asthma is significantly exacerbated in that home. And we're concerned about it because it could be a signifier of a lot of other issues going on in the home with the paint. There's always water intrusion. You know, I have been at CLC 16 years now. And when I started there, it was before the mold laws in DC. And we used to see trucks driving around DC that literally were like, paint, and we'll paint over your mold on the side of the trucks. And that was the most common solution I saw in our housing cases, was that the mold would just get painted over, which, as we all know, is not a solution. So I look forward to talking and hearing from our experts today on what the real solutions for mold are, so that you guys can all put me out of business as an individual case handling person, and we can all work together on real solutions for what should happen. If you go to the next slide. These are just some pictures that we get. When we see mold, we don't usually see just like little mold. We see sort of, this is the first one is somebody kind of plastered, painted over the mold, the walls buckling. We see these large swaths of mold in people's houses. Just to give you a sense, like we don't get involved if there's just like teeny tiny little bits of mold. Okay, keep going. And so thanks for being here today. I'm always can talk anybody's ears off, as Rusty knows, about the health implications of mold. Happy to answer any questions about that after the webinar or later in the webinar. So thank you guys for joining us on what is certainly an interesting day. Indeed.
Thank you so much, Kathy, for setting the stage there. I think it's super helpful to provide that context for our panelists as our panelists present their presentations. So to attendees, please go ahead and drop your questions or comments into the chat box. You can find the icon at the bottom of your screen, either the Q&A or the chat box, and we'll try to address as many as we can after our panelists have spoken. So first, I would like to introduce Dr. Chanlu Wang. He is professor in the Department of Entomology at Rutgers University. His research focuses on developing new and improved techniques and materials for urban pest management, insecticide resistance, and insect behavior. Chanlu has published 13 books or book chapters, more than 110 peer-reviewed papers, and more than 30 non-peer-reviewed articles on these subjects, and co-authored 2 patents that turned into widely used products in the US. He earned his PhD from West Virginia University. Welcome, Chanlu.
Thank you, Leslie. Well, thanks everyone for attending today's seminar. In this section, I will talk about remediating the indoor house mouse allergens through effective rodent management. Next. In this section, I want to achieve 3 objectives. First, to have a basic understanding of the health risks associated with rodents, which includes rats and mice, and then understand the challenges associated with rodent control. And lastly, I wanted to you'll learn about the effective strategies to reduce house mouse infestations. I will only focus on house mouse because rat infestation will need some different strategies to work with. Next. In the past, actually, we did some surveys about the prevalence of different pests in homes, and we found that house mouse is the second most common indoor pest problems in apartment buildings. And this is based on the survey of 4 cities, all low-income housing in New Jersey, and we found 20% of them had mice activities. And the picture shows the rat and the mouse and the 2 different traps used for controlling them. And the right picture shows a glue board with a mouse stuck on the glue board. Many people use glue board to try to catch mice. Next. Rodents can cause significant economic loss. They can cause damages to your property, such as your car, your books, your belongings, the furniture. They can also consume food or contaminate the food sources. Annually, there are billions of dollars lost due to rodent activities. Next. Rodent can cause a lot of different health risks. For house mouse, they contain allergens called the MUS-M1, which is very common in the urine and dander. And mouse allergen is associated with asthma morbidity. People with asthma are more likely to have more asthma attacks. In a study by Salo et al. In 2018, and they found 81% of the US homes have detectable mouse allergens in bedrooms. And in our recent study, we found that for any apartments with mouse activity, 61% of them had allergen levels that are above the threshold which causes asthma. This picture shows the mouse droppings and the urine stain under the bathroom sink. Next. Mouse also can carry a lot of different ectoparasites. The most abundant ectoparasites are the mites, and sometimes they also carry fleas. And because of this, they also can vector diseases such as the rickettsial pox. In a survey in apartment buildings in New Jersey, we found that 43% of the house mice contain a mite called a house mouse mite, Leishmaniasis sanguineus, which shows on the left picture. It feeds on the house mouse, but when the mice are killed, they would leave the host and then feed on human, and they can transmit rickettsial pox. Next. Urine, feces, and dander of the mice can also contain pathogenic microbes. The most common ones are listed here. You probably have heard about the Salmonella. Salmonella is a very common bacteria, can cause diarrhea. And there are other bacteria also associated with the urine and feces. And plus, there is a virus. On the lower right, you can see the picture of mouse droppings and the kitchen sink. This is a very severe infestation status. And you also see the damage to the cabinets on the edges. The mouse basically try to, through the edges, can get into the cabinet. Next. So there are many actually features that are causing the invasion of mice into the buildings. The most common feature is that many doors have a gap below. See here, you can see the exterior door with a horizontal gap. On the right picture, you see the light coming in. When you see the light coming in from the door, that gap is sufficient for the mice to enter. Next. Supposedly, you should install a door sweep, but many times they are installed improperly. Here you can see the left two pictures showing a metal door sweep. It's good, however, it's not installed properly, so there is a gap at the corner. So that small gap would allow the mice get in easily. Some vents, like basement vents, crawl space vents, or other windows, they have screens, but the screen size is too big for mice. They would come in easily. And the lower picture shows also the screen completely fell off to the ground. And in this case, actually a cat go into the building. The staff or the residents allow the cat to get in, but then the mice can also get in. Next, please. Interior, there are many actually points where allow the mouse to move between the units, and then also allow other pests, such as the under the sink. You see the horizontal pipes. Many of those locations have the missing, we call the escutcheon plates. Supposedly, you should have a round plate that would seal that gap, and then use the caulking material to fix to the escutcheon plate to the location. In the middle picture shows a gap between the gas line and the wall. This is the behind the stove. So this should also be sealed. The right picture shows the electrical conduit. This is in the closet. You see the grease marks where the mouse actually go into the wall. They can potentially also go to the next door. So these are the common locations, actually quite common. I think every apartment that we visited have these kind of effects. Next. Baseboard heating is common in some buildings, and this is also a common place where the mice can travel, hide between different apartments. In this case, the mice can get into the cabinetry easily through these baseboard heating. Supposedly, you should seal that location so that the mice cannot go into it. But in most cases we visited, there is always a gap. On the right picture shows there is no baseboard heating, but still there is a gap between the cabinetry and the wall, and the cabinetry and the wall and the floor. So supposedly you should seal that with caulking or with stainless steel rodent wool so that the rodents cannot enter it. Next. Interior doors, sometimes they have the door sweep. Those rubber door sweep really is not designed for rodent proofing. Here I want to show you a picture where this is a door that between the utility room and the kitchen. Both the left corner and the right corner were damaged by the mouse. You see the grease marks that appeared at the corner. Next. People try to control mice in different ways, but unfortunately, many times the control method is not effective or the material is not effective. For example, glue board is very commonly used for controlling mice, but it's not efficient way, it's not effective way because the mice would avoid it, they can get away, or it's not a human way to kill mice. The middle picture shows a repeller, which is common. Actually, people use this for repelling mice, roaches, bed bugs, etc. But none of these works. It's totally waste, but still people use it. On the right picture shows a rodenticide bait that placed on the kitchen counter. Well, not all the baits are very effective from what we tested. Also, when you apply rodenticide, where you put, how you put, also important. In this case, certainly is not good because then pets, children can access the bait, and plus this bait itself is not very effective. Next. When you apply bait, you have to consider sanitation because human food is more palatable than the rodenticide bait. And plus, the rodenticide bait has to be placed in the station. Here I want to show you on the left is where the refrigerator was. So you see two blue packets. Those are the rodenticides and some dirty materials. On the right picture is the stove area. You see many stuff under it. So really, if you want to control mice, you have to clean first, remove all the garbage, all the food, put the rodenticide in the station. Next. To show people how you can better control mice, we did a study in Trenton, and this was done in a low-income housing complex. We divided the buildings into 3 groups. So each group of 2 buildings, about 51 to 54 apartments. We have 3 different treatments: trapping baiting, trapping baiting plus exclusion, and the control. The control would be the existing contractor service. For exclusion, we basically seal the outside of the building and plus the interior of the building. But this was only done in 20 apartments with known house mouse activities because we realized that it's so expensive to do the exclusion. So next. Next. To monitor the mouse activity, we use the mouse station that contains we call the blank bait that we designed for rodents, and also chocolate spread. And we place one in each apartment for a week, then we check. We also do an interview to residents if they are available to ask if they saw mice. And we did this from 0 months, 6 months, then 12, 18. Actually, we finished also 24 months. So this way we can know the dynamics of the mice activities in the buildings. Next. In the control group, the existing pest control company, they use glue balls, rodenticides. And look at the rodenticides. They supposedly should be in the mouse station. And this actually is not a very effective way to control mice either because the poor sanitation and glue balls is not very effective. And they also only did this in apartments where they can access or people complained. If people don't complain, they don't go. So there are a lot of apartments actually had mice, but not controlled, not treated. Next. For the trapping and baiting group, we call the trap rat boxes, which contain 2 Victor wooden snap traps, and then mouse station contain 2 different rodenticides. And we use 2 because then we can compare which one is more effective. We placed the 1 set in the kitchen, 1 set in the living room, and we did a monthly follow-up and replace if necessary. Next. In the trapping, baiting, and the exclusion treatment group, besides the traps and baits, we also did the exclusion. We hired a company to come to treat and to exclude from inside and outside. For outside, they basically use concrete, use the 1/4 inch stainless steel mesh, use the caulking material, use the door sweep to seal all the gaps, holes, and around the pipes, doors, windows, etc. Next. For interior, we asked the company to use exclusion plates to seal the gaps around the pipes, use the screws to screw in, then use the caulking material. This way you can have 100% sure that the rats or mice will never go through those gaps. For large gaps or holes, then they use the 1/4 inch stainless steel mesh. This way, because it's not looking good, but at least you prevent the mice that move around between buildings. Next. So for total 18 months period, we found that the median number of mice caught was 3. The maximum was 38, so which is actually quite a lot, for one apartment with so many mice. You can imagine how much allergens and also other contaminants they can produce over time. Next. This is the result of the 18-month study. You can see the red line shows the mouse activity in the control group. This is the percent of apartments with mice. Actually, even though they had an existing pest control service, the percent of apartments with mice increased over time. So which indicating is a failure of control using the current service. Our 2 groups, trapping baiting and trapping baiting plus exclusion, reduced from basically 32 and 53 to 2% until 12 months, but then rebounded. One reason is that we think because from 12 months to 18 months is from summer to winter. So during the winter months, the mice tend to get into the buildings. We actually have 24 months data. At 24 months, the control group had a 55% infestation. In the trapping baiting is 0%, trapping baiting plus exclusion is 5%. So you can have a low level of mouse activity if you have a good control program. Next. We also found that if you do a very good mouse control, you also reduce the mouse allergen levels. We basically sampled the dust from kitchen and bedroom using vacuum machine, then analyze the concentration of the mouse allergen. The left picture shows in the kitchen, the control group had the allergen level actually increased from 11.7 to 16, so after 2 years, because of poor mouse control. In the intervention group, which we combined the trapping baiting exclusion and trapping baiting. So intervention group, it decreased from 18.3 to 0.4. And then bedroom, same thing. So control had high levels, intervention had low levels. Next, please. The cost of the program actually is quite high, especially the exclusion part. The exclusion actually cost about $247 per apartment. The material actually is very low. But if you compare with contractor service, they charge $8 per apartment per month for both cockroaches and mice, but they didn't have good control results. So if you exclude the exclusion, then actually the material cost is not much. So the main cost is exclusion. Next. There are some challenges we encountered, especially the sanitation clutter, which is unfortunate in some low-income housing. Next, please. And then there are some apartments we cannot access because it's sealed, or they are in repair for a long time. This allowed mice to move between apartments. Next. There are some missing places in the hallway, stairs. Then the mice can go from the crawl space to the first floor, then go up. So this is not something we cannot fix. Next. We also encountered some large gaps between the cabinets and the wall in the kitchen. And this is a defect because the rodents, mice basically, they get into the cabinetry easily. They hide inside, you cannot find them, it's hard to control. Next. So in summary, we found that most existing buildings have some rodent entry points. So for builders, you really have to think about how would you build the building, how you renovate the building. You have to keep in mind that mice are very small. You have to seal all the gaps very well so that you have a long-term, mouse prevention. Exclusion is very expensive, so this has to be done very thorough. So it's better done during the construction instead of after construction. And then effective mouse control can be achieved by using a combination of snap traps and rodenticide base. Each method has its own advantages or disadvantages, and we can discuss later. But effective mouse control certainly can reduce mouse allergens to very low levels. And then lastly, periodically building-wide monitoring is very important for detecting the new infestations. I think that's the last slide. Thank you for your attention, and you can write me email if you need.
Chang-Lu, thank you so much. That's so helpful to sort of understand the causes and what's effective and what's less effective. And I'd like to move on to Kobe Shull. Dr. Kobe Shull is the Whitmer Distinguished Professor at North Carolina State University. His lab at North Carolina State is developing practical solutions to indoor pest problems. His lab has published 400 peer-reviewed articles and book chapters, and Kobe holds 10 patents. He's mentored 39 graduate students and 42 postdoctoral researchers. Among other recognitions, Kobe received the HUD Secretary's Award for Healthy Homes, and he earned his PhD in entomology from the University of Kansas, Lawrence. Welcome, Kobe. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much. Oops, just give me a second.
No worries. Take your time. Great.
You can see this, right?
Yeah, we can see it perfectly.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
Well, happy to be here. Thank you very much all for joining. What I'd like to talk about today is practical IPM solutions to really severe cockroach infestations, especially in multifamily low-income housing. The outline of my talk is on the left here, just so you can follow it more readily. What we'll talk about today is the effect of cockroaches on public health. We will then talk about integrated pest management as a possible solution for the cockroach problem. We'll talk about why IPM oftentimes fails and why, and what are the remedies, and how do we make IPM work. We'll finally spend a lot of time talking about baits and the fact that baits are highly effective, but as Dr. Wang just mentioned with rodents, there are always challenges, and there are some challenges to the use of bait. The important thing I want to get across is that I really want us to not think about cockroach control or cockroach population management, but really cockroach elimination in multifamily housing. Right off the bat, I want to make sure that I acknowledge the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, for supporting our research, as well as the NIEHS, National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, and the EPA. They've very graciously supported our research. So this rather complicated slide is divided into two parts. On the left side, it shows some of the direct health risks and other risks associated with the German cockroach, Platella germanica. On the right side, I showed the indirect effects. And the direct effects, things that affect human health, are things like microbes and food contamination, antibiotic-resistant microbes, bacteria that they defecate into the home, allergies and asthma, and all kinds of other effects, including mechanical damage associated with short-circuiting electrical circuits and may result in fires. On the right side, this is a very important sort of a treadmill that residents in low-income housing are often on. They don't have the means to contract a good pest control operator to do the services, and so they take resident action. They use excessive amounts of insecticides. They often use dangerous and inappropriate products. That results, again, as Dr. Wang showed with rodents, it results in ineffective pest control, which results in persistence of the cockroach infestation, which feeds right back into the direct health effects of cockroaches. I want to concentrate on just a couple of them. We won't have time to talk about pathogen and disease transmission, but I do want to talk about allergens and respiratory disease that are due to cockroaches. As you know, asthma is an old but really surging pulmonary disease. It's becoming more and more common, especially in Western developed countries. It's a long-term lung disease. It inflames and narrows the airways in the lungs, and it's triggered by exposure to allergens. It's a huge problem in the U.S., not just in low-income housing, but about 25 million Americans have asthma. More than 7 million children have asthma, and the cost to the U.S. economy is huge, about $82 billion a year. And cockroaches have been known to be responsible for a portion of this asthma incidence. Cockroaches defecate very large and diverse types of allergens, and those allergens trigger allergies and asthma that require medical interventions. And medical interventions, as we all know, is extremely expensive. So in recent years, we have changed this model a little bit by showing that cockroaches are not only responsible for producing allergens, but the bacteria and fungi that cockroaches defecate into the human environment also produce all sorts of toxins, and these microbial toxins, together with the allergens, are responsible for causing allergies and asthma, again, requiring medical interventions. What I want to convince you of today is that we can reduce the cost of medical interventions by conducting environmental interventions that result in cockroach elimination. And a lot of this we discuss in a number of review papers and chapters in books that we have written over the years. So the important thing about this slide is microbial toxins are very important, and effective environmental interventions or cockroach elimination can reduce the amount of allergens and toxins, resulting in less allergies, less asthma, and fewer medical interventions. And here is some even most recent unpublished data that we have shown. We've shown that cockroaches, especially the female adult cockroach that eats a lot, actually defecates a huge amount of endotoxin into the human environment, into the kitchen. And when we go into cockroach-infested homes and cockroach uninfested homes, we find that in infested homes, cockroach-infested homes, there is a lot more endotoxin, both in the kitchen and in the bedroom, than in uninfested homes. So this suggests that cockroaches are causing allergies and asthma, not only because of the allergens, but also because of microbial toxins that they defecate into the environment. So just to summarize the health risk section of this talk, cockroaches carry and disseminate pathogenic microbes, including antibiotic-resistant bacteria that we didn't talk about. They also produce allergens that trigger asthma, especially in sensitized children. And they produce very potent endotoxins and other microbial toxins that increase the allergic and asthmatic response. And we're in the process now of identifying all sorts of emerging new toxins that are found in cockroach-infested homes that are not found in uninfested homes. So what are we to do about this? Obviously, because of all these health risks, cockroach elimination is essential. But the question is, how do we eliminate cockroaches? What are consumers' options? One is to live with the problem, and this is obviously a very bad idea. It's because there are major health consequences to leaving this infestation alone. And others to hire a professional, but as you know, in low-income housing and affordable housing, professional pest management people are often unaffordable. The third option is to use over-the-counter products, and again, as Dr. Wang indicated, even though these are cheap and affordable, they do not work. So most of the things on the shelf in Home Depot and Lowe's and your local grocery store, they really don't work in the hands of the consumer, even though they're found very commonly under the kitchen sink in many homes that we visit. We have published a number of papers showing that these things don't work. So the insecticide type materials generally don't work to reduce the cockroach population. And again, as Dr. Wang indicated, the ultrasonic type devices also don't work. So they don't cost much, but the investment does not result in any efficacy. So they're really not good materials to use. And actually, they leave a very large amount of insecticide residues, which result in these indirect effects that I was talking about before. So the solution, both in agriculture as well as in the indoor environment, the solution is integrated pest management. Integrated pest management is based on the idea of integrating a lot of different approaches, both that include both pest prevention, pest exclusion, again, as Dr. Wang talked about with rodents, all the way to pest management, or the elimination of the pest population. And this approach, in fact, has been very effective in detached homes, in private homes, where there are very few cockroach infestations. Most of the insects that are found in these homes are very diverse insects that come from the outside into the home. So most of the pest management, the pest control is preventative. Most of it occurs mainly outdoors. It's very time consuming. It's very expensive, but people that can afford these homes can afford the expensive pest control outside. And it's usually very effective. So the cost on this pyramid, it's a very high cost to do all these cultural and sanitation practices. Pest exclusion, again, as Dr. Wang showed, is very expensive. So they spend a lot of money out here. By the time they get to the use of pesticides and the elimination of the pest population, there's very little money left in a budget in affordable housing. So this is the situation in multifamily low-income housing. It's mainly the pest complex is mainly dominated by cockroaches, the German cockroach, occasionally bedbug. It's very unsanitary conditions, and it's very difficult to control these pests. So what are we to do? What I would like to introduce the idea, it's IPM, it's integrated pest management, but I like to turn it upside down. I'd like us to start with pest elimination, which is very inexpensive, less time consuming, does not require resident participation, and tends to be very effective. And then after the pests are eliminated, we can then move on to environmental remediation, which is very expensive, to exclude pests from returning into the home. So in other words, we're shifting from pest management in a typical integrated pest management to pest elimination. And does it work? And so I want to show you proof of concept that it does work. We go into many, many homes that are infested with cockroaches. Here's an example of one, and you can see these massive number of cockroaches in these homes. Under institutional review board approval, we go into these homes, we collect dust from these homes, and the dust is used to quantify how much allergen, how many microbes are there, how much toxins are there. But we also place traps in these homes and the traps allow us to estimate the infestation size. And then we go in and we do an intervention. In this case, we do bait-only intervention, and we monitor the efficacy of this intervention using traps again. So here are the results of a very extensive intervention that we have done recently. We have 3 groups in these apartments, uninfested homes, and 2 groups of infested homes that we split into, infested homes that we split into 2 groups. One is infested control homes in blue, and we monitor what happens when we do nothing in these homes. And the other is the other group is cockroach-infested homes, where we apply our bait intervention, and the results are very clear. And we've done this time and time again. The results are very clear. In homes where we don't do anything, there's no change in the number of cockroaches in these homes. But in homes where we apply baits, we get huge reduction in the cockroach population, and in many of these homes, we completely eliminate the cockroaches from these homes. What is critical from a public health perspective is when we do these interventions, the amount of allergen in these homes also declines dramatically. Again, in the infested homes that serve as control, the allergen remains the same. If anything, it rises a little bit. But in the homes where we eliminate the cockroaches, the amount of allergen declines over time, over 6 months. And if we continue this for 12 months, the amount of allergen declines even more. So by eliminating cockroaches, we also dramatically reduce the amount of allergen. And most recently, we showed, again, this is unpublished data, we have shown that by eliminating the cockroaches, we also reduce the amount of endotoxin in the home dramatically at 6 months. So endotoxin and allergen work together to cause asthmatic episodes. So by doing that, we presumably improve the health conditions of asthmatic children. And in fact, several years ago, we have shown by collaborating with researchers at Tulane University in New Orleans that by doing this type of intervention, not only do we control cockroaches, but the children in these homes, asthmatic children in these homes, have fewer unscheduled emergency room visits, and they have better pulmonary function. By measuring their pulmonary function with these exhalation devices, we can show that after elimination of cockroaches, children have better health outcomes. So this is really critical. Now, why do baits work so well? The baits work so well because of the biology of the cockroach. Every stage in the development of the cockroach, from a baby cockroach that you can see here coming out of the egg case, all the way to the adult stage, every single stage must feed in order to go to the next stage. And the baits are very effective because cockroaches find them and feed on them. Baits are also much more effective than sprays or residual insecticides because baits are much more bioavailable. The amount of insecticide the cockroach eats when it takes a typical meal, typical bait meal, is about 500-fold what's required to kill the cockroach. So it's much, much more effective than using sprays in the home. Now, baits, in all of the interventions that we have done, we use the baits exclusively by themselves, but baits can be even more effective if one goes in and vacuums cockroaches. Instead of feeding them to kill them, you can vacuum them out, improving sanitation. But keep in mind that by doing vacuuming and sanitation, yes, you use less baits, so we save some dollars on the amount of material that we use, but the problem is that it's very laborious, so the expense is actually quite high. Baiting is not rocket science. Baiting is really simple, but baiting requires a lot of time because we need to spread that bait throughout the kitchen, and oftentimes not just the kitchen and bathroom. In affordable housing, often there may be a separate family that lives in a bedroom, and so the bedroom serves as a kitchen as well. So really the whole home needs to be treated with baits. So again, it's not rocket science. So baits alone can eliminate cockroaches if placed effectively. The video here shows a bait. Here's a dab of bait, and cockroaches immediately start feeding on it. And by feeding on it, these cockroaches will die. I know I'm running out of time, so I want to talk a little bit about challenges with baits. Education is really important. Education of both the consumer as well as education of the pest management professionals that are doing these applications. That's critical. Misapplication. Oftentimes people use too little bait and therefore they don't get good efficacy. People have this idea that baiting is expensive. Baiting, in fact, is more expensive early on, but baits are so effective that over time the cost of baits declines dramatically. Whereas with conventional pest control, where a pest control operator comes in every single month or every quarter, the cost remains high and the same over time. Whereas with baits, the cost declines over time. Contracts with pest management professional needs to be explicit about monitoring and the use of baits. And in low-income housing, really, we need to ask ourselves whether pest control should be done by commercial companies versus in-house pest control. In-house pest control can be requires less travel, and therefore it's much less expensive, greater access to apartments, community buy-in, which is really important, and the profit motive is eliminated by not having commercial pest control operators, so it can become less expensive. There are some really serious challenges to the use of baits. The most important challenges are insecticide resistance that can be both physiological and behavioral. I'm going to skip a bunch of slides to talk about some of these challenges because most of these challenges are beyond our control. They have to do with the pest management professional. But here's a list of baits that are available to both the consumer, in some cases to a consumer, in most cases to a pest management professional. And these baits come in several different modes of action, several different classes of baits. And it's really critical to rotate amongst these different baits to forestall the evolution or the emergence of insecticide resistance. So again, to summarize the take-home points, beyond nuisance and aesthetics, cockroaches are significant public health pests because they produce allergens, pathogens, they contaminate the environment, and they leave behind huge insecticide residues because people try to control them ineffectively. Complex IPM generally does not work. It's too expensive. It's unsustainable. Baits are very effective. Baits can eliminate, not just reduce infestations, and allergen removal, in other words, cleaning and structural remediation, should follow the elimination of cockroaches, not precede it. And sprays are usually not necessary in most residential settings. I'll finish by thanking all of you for listening and thanking all the agencies and industry that has supported our research. Thank you very much.
Toby, thank you so much. It was just so helpful to see what's working. I'll just remind our attendees to please drop your questions or comments into the chat. And after our last speaker today, we will address the questions. So our next speaker, we'll move on to the next slide for Rusty Spearman. In just a moment, I think we're switching slide decks. There we go. Our next speaker is William Rusty Spearman, a nationally board certified indoor environmentalist with Arrowhead Consulting. Rusty is a building science and construction expert. He conducts indoor air quality inspections, environmental assessment, scopes of work, and protocol development. He performs evaluations and testing for mold, bacteria, ATP, allergens, formaldehyde, air water infiltration, and conducts thermal imaging to determine sources of water intrusion or plumbing leaks. Welcome, Rusty. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you folks very much for having this very important webinar. It's very, very informative. And thank you for inviting me to participate. I'm the president and owner of Arrowhead Consulting. We're an indoor air quality testing firm. We do a significant amount of work in the district, in residential, commercial, government, multi-unit properties. We also provide consulting and expert witness services for many law firms in the district, as well as universities and the government. Actually, the Office of the Attorney General, I do quite a bit of work. I have about 20 years experience in this field. And so we'll get started here. Next slide. During this block, I'm going to discuss water intrusion into buildings, as well as mold growth. I'm not a doctor, so I'm going to shy away from the allergens and illnesses regarding mold exposure and that sort of thing. I think both the previous guests covered that quite extensively. Next slide, please. Let's see. Sorry about that. Most water intrusion issues in multi-unit properties are due to three areas. Building envelope failure, which includes the roof, the walls, the foundation, and the floor slab at the lowest level of the building. The interior building plumbing and appliance failures. And the third is tenant-sourced water intrusion issues or flooding. Next slide, please. Roof leaks generally will occur due to a couple different items. The roof membrane failure, pass-throughs of electrical conduits and plumbing, vent stacks, that sort of thing, as well as ponding. The majority of the multi-unit buildings in the district are flat roofs, and those are especially prone to water intrusion. Exterior wall intrusion would include around windows and doors, soffits, and the any other entry points for plumbing or electrical lines, that sort of thing. And the basement areas, the foundations and the slabs would generally be either seepage through the foundation walls or sewage backups, which are prevalent in the district. Next slide, please. A couple of pictures here. Flat roofs, you can see the protrusions through the roof area. Water can find the easiest route into an area. So it's very important to monitor these areas of the roof. The right-hand side picture shows ponding. When you have ponding on the roof, that water sits there for an extended period of time, and water will find its way through the smallest opening in the roof membrane. It's a big problem, mainly because of the design of roof membranes. There's generally multiple layers. They don't always necessarily tear off the old membrane before installing a new one. So you get rises and pitches that will keep the water on the roof as opposed to going through the drain system. Next slide, please. Here are two other areas of the roof. The curbed edge going around the perimeter of the roof. There's a lot of flashing there. Anywhere there's a lot of flashing, you have a lot of opportunity for water to enter into the inner portions of the building. On the right-hand side, the metal-clad parapet wall. Metal-clad meaning that you have metal flashing going up over the top and down the outside of a masonry roof system. And those will rust, corrode, separate. It's not one long piece of metal, so there will be seams that are generally caulked or sealed due to drastic temperature differentials. Really hot in the summer, really cold in the winter. Those expand and contract and are very susceptible to cracking and failure. Next slide, please. Other areas of the roof system that are problematic are the drain systems, either interior in the center of the roof is pitched downwards and inwards to hit a center downspout that runs internally through the building and then out to a drain. The flashing around those, again, is problematic, similar to the parapet wall. Expansion and contraction of the roof system will separate the membrane and the flashing, allowing water that's directed into the middle of the roof will actually funnel the water into a leak. Improper sloping of the roofs will also cause issues going into scupper drains and again the flashing at the parapet walls. Next slide, please. This is an example of a project I had actually last week. They just got their report. Picture on the left shows the soffit cap right in the center of the picture, raised up. It's actually directing the water into the brick fascia of the building. The right-hand side picture, if you look closely, the right edge of the building, right at the corner, you see the discoloration going from top to bottom of the building. That is staining and efflorescence of the water actually running inside of the brick and between the brick and the mortar blocks that form the inside portion of the walls. And it's seeping back out to the exterior of the building, leaving the salts and mineral deposits on the exterior of the building. If that had been noticed earlier, the 4 units that are directly the tier of 4 units in that corner would not have been impacted with water intrusion, water damage, and mold growth. As it stands right now, all 4 units are going to require remediation done by a licensed mold remediation company, which gets very, very expensive. Regular maintenance inspections would have picked this up much earlier. It would have cost $700 to $1,000 to fix it, to get a bucket up there and get a maintenance person to cant that the correct way, slope it outwards. Instead, they are going to have to spend $8,000 to $10,000 per unit to remediate those units. That does not include temporary housing for the tenants because they can't be in there during the remediations, and the rebuild process to put everything back that they had to take out. So scheduled inspections, regular maintenance inspections would have picked this up and saved the homeowner or the building owner a significant amount of money. Next slide, please. Here you have the basement. A couple of things here. You see the ground is sloped away from the foundation on the left-hand picture. That's the way it should be. It also has a backflow valve in the drain line. That's to prevent a backflow of sewage back into the basement through the floor vent or through the floor drain. The right-hand side picture is a little bit of artwork on my part. You see the yellow orange color. That's a negative grading slope towards the building, which is called a negative grade. That directs groundwater right up against the block foundation wall, which will increase the hydrostatic pressure against the wall, and water will find its way inside. Now, water gets inside, it can impact any organic material that's on the walls, such as a foundation sealant, or if there's drywall there, if it's a basement apartment, the wall drywall and the framing behind. So there's certain things that you need to keep an eye on buildings as far as grading and that sort of thing. Next slide, please. Okay, interior, plumbing and appliances. These are building-owned appliances and plumbing with regular maintenance and inspections. Any kind of leakage can be found quickly before mold has a chance to grow, or to a point where you're going to require a major remediation having to take place. Some of the common failures are common drain line. Those are the stacks that are going up through the building, where units on a tier will drain into the same pipe, which takes it down to the basement level and out of the building. Sink and tub feed lines, supplying white water or fresh water to sinks and tubs. Those have a tendency to spring leaks at valves and joints and that sort of thing. I see this quite a bit. Are blocked and disconnected HVAC condensate drain lines. In the summertime, the coils produce a significant amount of water. If those drain lines are not kept clear, that will back up and impact not only the unit where the HVAC system is located, but generally it will impact units directly below. Another one commonly found is condensation in bathrooms due to lack of proper venting. Some of these buildings are old enough where the building code doesn't require an exhaust fan, a mechanically operated exhaust fan. So people only have windows. Some of these windows have been painted shut for decades. You see layers and layers of paint. So there's actually absolutely no venting in the bathroom. You get a significant amount of surface mold growth on ceilings and walls. Water heater or radiator leaks, that's pretty self-explanatory. And then drain line backups, and this is addressing lower level units, basement level units, where a backflow through a floor drain will flow outwards and impact any unit that's on that level. Some of the prevention, these are for the building owners and maintenance people. Do initial inspections prior to having a tenant moving in. Identify and repair leaks quickly. Most of the problems related to mold growth in the buildings is due to a lack of response. The maintenance people will go in, they don't have the right tools, they don't even have a basic moisture meter. They look, they don't see moisture, and they say, no, everything is fine. Meanwhile, the wall is soaking wet. It's just not visible from the conditioned side of the wall. Educate your tenants. Give them a little packet. Develop one of items that they need to be aware of. Cleaning your return vents going into the HVAC system. Making sure if they're responsible for filter changes that they're doing it. Make sure they're not clogging up underneath a kitchen sink. There's some instances where it takes me 10 minutes to move everything out from underneath the kitchen sink just to see the plumbing. So you want to keep that open so that you can look at it. For building responsibilities, as far as HVAC filter replacements, I find that a lot of times the only time they replace the filters is when there's an inspection coming up or someone's bringing in a third party, such as myself. They will change the filters real quick. And then most importantly, regular ongoing inspections. Walk around the property, set up a schedule with the tenants where you can have a maintenance person come in and just check the basics, all the valves, sinks, look for early signs of water damage or mold growth, and then identify it and get it fixed. Next slide, please. Here are some examples of building failures, building plumbing failures. The old terracotta drain lines, they're being phased out, but there's still quite a few. Very susceptible to tree roots, soil movement, that sort of thing, which will cause sediment to get inside the pipe and cause a backup. When you have an 8-story building, there's a lot of stuff leaving that building. It doesn't have anywhere to go. It's going to back up to the lowest drain, which would be in the basement. Galvanized steel pipes, those are still prevalent. They will corrode and rot out, causing pinhole leaks and then catastrophic failures down the line. So you want to check these pipes anywhere that they're accessible in the building. Next slide, please. It's a picture of a cast iron stack, drain stack that runs the height of the building. The units will all on that tier drain into. They are very susceptible to corrosion and leaks around joints, that sort of thing. And on the right is a picture of an accepted method of repairing a section of the cast iron pipe. Next slide, please. This is a picture of a project that I had been working on for approximately 4 years. It's a building in DC, 8-story building, 68 units. They're set up on 9 tiers, so it's 9 stacks of units. And you can see in the left-hand picture, there's 3 cast iron drains. This is a basement level unit. All 3 of these stacks had leaks on different levels of the building. So one stack, I believe, was on the 5th level, one was on the 3rd, and one was on the 7th. This building had a lot of issues. I've inspected it 11 times in 4.5 years. I've been to 3 court hearings. They had a receiver assigned to it. And just 2 weeks ago, they settled based partially on my reports about the building. So now they are required to sell the building to a developer who will sign a document saying they're going to properly fix everything. The picture on the right is a leak in the basement. You can see the water running down the outside of the pipe. That leak actually started on the 5th floor. So the units above this, the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th tiers or floors on that tier were directly impacted by this leak. Next slide, please. Here, I'm running short on time. Building plumbing, the old installation of the building traps, and on the right-hand side, new construction. You can see that there's access points inside the building as well as proper venting. Next slide, please. Picture on the left shows a backflow valve in the basement. And the picture on the right, I just wanted to show you, see how many plumbing joints there are in the typical bathroom in an apartment. There's 8 different joints there. That's 8 different points of possible leaking. Next slide, please. Tenant sourced real quickly. Overflow of sinks, tubs, leaking aquariums, window HVAC systems that are installed incorrectly. They're sloped inward instead of outward, and then damaged plumbing underneath sinks. They're just throwing pots and pans underneath a kitchen cabinet, the sink cabinet, banging up against the pipes, and they'll hit a valve, crack a pipe, break a weld or a solder joint, and all of a sudden you have a leak. Next slide, please. I'm going to show you some pictures of units that I've done recently. One on the left is the HVAC return. It's actually in the closet where they keep the cleaning supplies. There's vacuum cleaner in there. There's rags in there. There's bucket. Very easy for the tenant to wipe all that dust and stuff off the return vent, which is directly impacting the airflow. Right-hand side picture are the A coils of that same unit, and they are completely clogged. So this system is not conditioning that unit properly and getting a significant amount of condensation build up on interior walls and the metal diverters. Next slide, please. Mold needs 3 things to grow. A good temperature, anything above 36 degrees Fahrenheit, mold will grow. Good food source, anything organic, mold will use as a food source. The only wild card that's not inherent to just about every building is moisture or water. Mold can start growing within 5 days under optimum circumstances, and eliminating the water and moisture in the unit is the only way to prevent the mold growth from thriving. Next slide, please. Common mistakes. Kathy mentioned it in her intro. Painting over mold growth does not work. Treating mold with bleach, all it does is take the color out of the mold growth and makes it clear, so it's still there. 90% of bleach is water, so you're actually adding water to an already problematic situation. Covering mold growth with building materials, removing mold growth without eliminating the source of water. And I'll show you some pictures here in a second of that. Ignoring a tenant complaint regarding potential water intrusion, potential mold growth. Act on their complaints, because generally there'll be something behind it. Not regularly inspecting interior and exterior portions of the building. Not adhering to DCDOE mold regulations, which dictate mold inspections as well as remediation processes and licensing. When in doubt, hire a professional to evaluate and guide you through the process to give you the right next steps. Next slide, please. This is a project where not very well patched ceiling in a bathroom. And to the right is the thermal image of that same patch, approximately 2 weeks after they patched it. They never fixed the leak. Next slide. Here's a very expensive mistake. Found a leak in a kitchen during an inspection. They supposedly fixed it, put in brand new walls, brand new cabinetry, brand new countertops and appliances. I came in 2 weeks later, and the thermal image on the right shows a steady stream of water running down that wall. So they never fixed the leak. So they're gonna have to rip that kitchen back out again. The next slide. And fiberboard screwed into the inside of a kitchen base cabinet. Undid the screws in the right-hand picture, bent it back, and there's mold growth behind it. I was there 3 to 4 months later when I did another inspection. It's probably still that way today. That's the building that just went to settlement. The next slide. And that's it. Thank you, folks. I know I ran a little bit over time. I apologize.
No, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. It's really startling, some of the things that we think are working that are not working. So very much appreciate that overview of the work. So thanks to all of you for your wonderful presentations today. We're going to move to some of the questions that we received in the chat. If you have additional questions, please drop them into the chat and we'll try to get as many as we can until 12:30. First of all, there was a quick question about radon gas. I don't know if any of you can address this, although radon is completely separate from pests, mold, and muck. Do you believe radon is an equal issue causing health issues compared to pests, mold, and such? I'll just address that to any of you if you have thoughts on radon.
From what I understand, radon is prevalent in DC and Virginia, Maryland area. I'm not aware that it's problematic in the short term as far as asthma type symptoms or any kind of physical reaction. I do understand that it is a carcinogen, that long-term exposure to it can cause cancer. So it's important that it be taken care of, and it can be remediated by installing a pump that goes down below the slab of the building, a 6-inch PVC pipe, and then runs and extends out the building above the eaves. And that pump pumps air from underneath the slab containing the radon and exhausts it out above the building where it goes out in the atmosphere. It's common everywhere. It's decomposing radioactive material in the Earth's crust, and it comes up through the ground. And if you happen to have a building over a fissure or a source of it, you have more of a chance of having it getting into the building.
I dropped information from DC's Department of Energy and Environment into the chat that they have, and from doing a training with them in the past where they trained on this, they're much more concerned about it, or it's more common in the district if your building has a basement that goes underground.
Mm-hmm.
But radon does occur in apartment buildings, so testing for it is critical.
And it's a 48-hour test. They leave a box in a unit or in the basement. They pick it up 48 hours later, analyze it, and they'll tell you the exact amount of radon, if any, is in the building, in that sampled location.
Thank you. I had a question for Chang Lu about the exclusion door sweep. I'm not sure if I'm calling it that, but it was a particular type of door sweep that you recommended. And is that different from the conventional door sweep? And if so, how is it different?
Yes, the brand is called the Excluder rodent proof door sweep. You can buy from the manufacturer or from Amazon. The difference is the bottom part. Actually, the inside is a stainless steel wool. So if the rodent tend to say bite through, then they will encounter that spiky stainless steel wool. Then they will stop biting. So that's why it's more rodent proof than the conventional ones. Conventional, like if you have a rubber seal, the rubber really not rodent proof. They can chew it through easily.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. So excluder door sweep. That's
Yes,
useful
yes.
to know. Okay. Another question for Kobe. You discussed that endotoxins and other toxins actually, well, the question I just wanted to get at, were you saying that they actually cause asthma and not just trigger episodes of asthma attacks with people who already have asthma?
Yeah, so endotoxins can trigger asthma episodes, but in addition, when endotoxin and allergen work together, the endotoxin serves to facilitate the asthmatic episode. It makes it worse. Okay. In scientific terms, it acts as an adjuvant, but we don't need to go there. Yeah, so the asthmatic episode is worse when the allergen is combined with endotoxin.
Okay. And then there was a question in the chat that I saw you addressed, Kobe, but maybe you can discuss it regarding ants in the home.
Yeah, I think Shang-Lu can address that as well. Most of the ant problems originate outside, so there's really no need to use a lot of insecticides in the home, but rather to find out where the ants are coming from and treat the source of the ants. The colony is usually outside. There are a few species of ants that establish inside the home, and in those cases, most times, I would say just about 100% of the time, baits are really effective. Once you identify where the ants are, you can place bait very close to where they are. They will recruit workers to eat the bait and deliver it back to the colony. And the key is to kill the queen or queens that live in a colony.
Yeah, that's right. So most of the ants are coming from outside. Like in the Northeast, the most common ones are the carbon ants, human ants, and the odorous house ants. Those are the three main ones. They commonly occur outside, but they can certainly go inside. In my home, I know they often go inside. But if you find the nest, the carbon ants nest usually on large trees or wooden stump. Odorous house ants in the mulch. So if you reduce the mulch, you reduce the odorous house ants. Pavement ants along the pavement. Just find the nest, treat the nest outside. The only one that are pharaoh ants, Kobe said. Pharaoh ants actually, they can nest inside. They have multiple queens. You have to find where the nest is, then apply the gel bait. It will kill them.
Got it. Thank you. Last question here. Can you recommend educational resources that could be passed on to building residents regarding all of these issues? What building residents can do, or yeah.
I don't have one, but maybe we can make a fact sheet about rodent prevention.
I think that what we can do is gather some links and other resources and post them together with the recording of this webinar.
Yeah, there's an IPM center that's headquartered at Cornell University that serves as kind of a national IPM center that really concentrates on the indoor environment as well. I can send you the link. I just need to find it.
Also, DC DOE website has some links for mold in the home prevention and treatment, as well as the EPA has several good areas on their site for the homeowner or tenant, some of the things that they can do inside the home to prevent the mold growth.
Wonderful. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Susan. And thank you all again for these wonderful presentations.
Awesome. Thanks, Leslie. And thank you again to Chang-Lu, Kobe, and Rusty for sharing your insights today. Super helpful and informative session. And yes, we can work on gathering some links and posting those along with the recording. I have a code on the screen and a link in the chat to fill out our post-event survey, if you could please. This feedback is very important to us as we plan future sessions. Once you complete this later by the end of the day, you'll get a link to the recording and the slides. If you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to myself or Leslie, and we can field those to our experts here if needed. But without any further ado, we'll go ahead and wrap up today's session. Again, thank you all for joining us, and thank you to our speakers. Have a great rest of your day.
Wonderful.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
I know.